Call Carmel Sepuloni.
Mr Speaker, we're really disappointed on this side of the House. We engaged with the government in good faith over this matter, recognising that actually this was an error that occurred under both National and Labor governments. Mr Speaker, what's come to light during this process is actually that technical error occurred during a very similar process that we've gone through today. It occurred under urgency. It occurred because of the fact that due diligence wasn't given to that bill, that a select committee wasn't called to look over it, that submissions were not made. And Mr Speaker, clearly when we rush things through an urgency like this, then we increase the chances of technical errors like that being made. So it seems ridiculous that we're here 17 years after that bill passed, going through the same process that saw that bill fail in the first place, Mr Speaker. All we had asked with this bill, or we'd put to the Minister or we'd put to the National Government MPs, was that they support our SOP to delay the commencement so that natural justice could prevail. But unfortunately, the government couldn't even do that. Mr Speaker, we've seen very little argument put up during committee stages against what we were saying. We have seen in the departmental disclosure statement that there were fiscal considerations here, and yet we still never got an answer from the Minister or from the National Government in the House today about what exactly those fiscal considerations were. What was the dollar amount that the government were so concerned about with respect to the claims that could come forward? We heard from the Minister that there have been 8,500 claims made by people who think they may be eligible to claim back that day. And I say to those people, and I say to the beneficiary advocates out there that have pushed them to put their claims in, well done, good on them, and I'm glad that at least those 8,500 people will have their claims honoured. What I am very disappointed for the other thousands of New Zealanders who are now going to be denied the opportunity to put a claim forward because it doesn't suit the government's agenda. And what the government is doing here tonight is legislating retrospectively to deny them of the opportunity to claim what they will be entitled to up until the point that this bill passes and comes into commencement, Mr Speaker. We had so many concerns raised at the committee, not the committee stage, at the select committee when this particular bill, when the elements of this particular bill were still in the other social security bill, Mr Speaker, and those concerns should have been taken into consideration here, because clearly there was no select committee opportunity to hear submissions on this particular bill, but we have discussed the intent of this particular bill during select committee for another bill, and we should have taken seriously the concerns that were raised. Mr Speaker, there have been numerous reports about the numbers of people that may have been affected. One number we heard come from the Minister was something like 2.5 million people who have gone on and then off benefits over the last 17 years. And I guess that acts as a reminder to the whole House that actually a large number of New Zealanders at some point in time are going to need to rely on that welfare safety net. And Mr Speaker, I think that that is something that we need to be reminded of, that it's not about people wanting to be long-term dependent on the state necessarily. It is about the fact that we have a lot of New Zealanders that at some point in time are going to find themselves out of employment and needing to rely on the state during that period. Mr Speaker, so many other elements of this bill are concerning. The fact that it never went to the Attorney-General, the fact that there are concerns that it may not be consistent with the New Zealand Bill of Rights, as pointed out by so many of the submissions made to the other bill in relation to this subject. Mr Speaker, we've made it really clear that our concern too are for the people who work in jobs that are more likely to have been in and out of work over a period of time. We referred to teacher assistants, teacher aides, we referred to seasonal workers, we referred to those that go in and out of temporary work. Those people are the ones that stand to lose now because of the decision that the government has made, because actually for many of them, they have gone in and out of work over a long period of time. Teacher aides, some are employed term by term. Some, at the end of each term, go on that stand-down period as they wait for their benefit to come in during the 2 weeks or whatever it is during the school holidays that they are no longer getting paid from the school. Now, those workers, Mr. Speaker, deserved the opportunity to make a claim, and the government's now denied them of that. And I say they deserve it because the level of insecurity in the work that they do, the expectations on them in terms of the service they provide, the children, our children, that they are looking after on a daily basis, the fact that they are so poorly paid, and yet this government was so mean-spirited that they couldn't take into consideration workforces like those teacher aides, like the seasonal workers, like the temporary workers. They couldn't take into consideration that actually those workers had something to gain here. It wasn't just a matter of of 1 day, and the ministers pointed out in press releases, oh, it's only 1 day, it's not much money. Well, to these people, it actually would have been a lot of money. And actually, to many of these people, it would have been more than just 1 day. And here we are in November, heading into Christmas, and that government's so mean-spirited that now they've denied them of the opportunity to make that claim. And what a difference it could have made to their families. Mr. Speaker, I've spoken to so many people out and about. There's lots of people who may have gone on a benefit once over the last 17 years, maybe even twice, who actually has said to me, I wouldn't have made a claim. But it's not about whether or not they would have made it. It's about ensuring that natural justice does prevail and that they were given the opportunity to actually do it. That's why we put the SOP up. We understand the government's need to correct this technical error in the legislation. We support that. But what we couldn't support is the fact that they were going to deny the groups of New Zealanders that I've talked about in this speech the natural justice that they deserved. All we asked was for a 6-week window for those people to be able to put in a claim. All we asked was that the government provide that 6-week window by delaying the commencement date of the bill by 6 weeks. And they are so mean-spirited that they could not even agree to that one small ask from us. We have nothing to gain in doing this. We did it because it's the right thing to do. And all we hoped was that the government would acknowledge that it was the right thing to do as well. We've had several speeches tonight from my colleagues, from colleagues in the opposition parties, talking about, the idea, what if this was retrospective legislation that applied to businesses? Would the government be so quick to enact such retrospective legislation if that was the case? Of course they wouldn't. And you know what? The unfortunate thing is that if it was retrospective legislation that might apply to businesses, they would have the means in which to take out a case against the government. They would have the influence in which to change the government's mind or to force them not to do it. But unfortunately, we're talking about New Zealanders here who don't necessarily have the means, that don't necessarily know what's happening in Parliament, that don't necessarily know how the decisions we make affect their everyday lives. And the government knows that. The government knows that the beneficiaries we're talking about that stand to lose here are often, unfortunately, the people with the quietest voices. Mr. Speaker, I want to finish this final reading by just final speech by just again expressing my disappointment in the government. We really did want to work with the government on this, and I also want to just thank people out there who have been pushing this as quickly and as hard as they can to anyone who might be eligible, all of the beneficiary advocates. Particularly, I want to acknowledge Kay Brereton, who brought this to my attention, who brought this to the media's attention, who brought this to the attention of the House. She's done a fantastic job advocating for beneficiaries. There are 8,500 beneficiaries who now have their claims in. The only reason they really started to come in numbers is because MSD did start to pay out and people realised, actually, this isn't a hoax. I may actually be eligible for some money, and she's responsible for getting the word out. I also want to acknowledge the CTU. They put the word around to the unions as well. The Meat Workers Union, I know, put the word out because they have a lot of workers who are on work and then off work and then forced to have to go on benefit, and so may have a number of stand-down periods as well. So to all those that have tried to get the word out there, I want to acknowledge them. And finally, I just want to say no thanks to the National Government for being so mean-spirited, and I'm very disappointed
I'm sorry
that
to
you
interrupt
haven't
the
supported
member.
our SOP.
Her time has expired.